So my name's Harrison Chase. About a year and a half ago, I started an open source developer tool called Langchain. And this was about a month before ChatGPT, but it was really centered around the technology that underpowers it, the large language models that OpenAI was producing. And a lot of the idea of this developer tool was to make it easy for engineers to build other applications and other sorts of interfaces on top of this technology. And a lot of these types of applications could maybe be described as agents. And I would argue that a lot of the futuristic, forward-thinking things that people have proposed and talked about here tonight can also be described as agents. And so I want to talk a little bit about what agents are, how we think about them, and then also what the future of agents, I think, is. So if you think of a language model, it takes in tokens, it takes in text, and it outputs other tokens, and that's great. It can help you write tweets, it can help you write marketing copy. A lot of the really interesting things that we see people doing are taking those tokens that are outputted by the language model and using them as input to some other tool or some other API downstream. Essentially, they're asking the language model to decide what the input to a next step should be. They're deciding what an action to take should be. And so I think an equivalent or a way to think about this is there's a lot of cool demos of co-pilots for the web or a browser. And there was a really cool one for coding that came out yesterday. And if people haven't seen it, it's called Devon, and you should go check it out. And you see this application that it's given a coding task, and then it basically starts doing things. And so it starts writing some code, it starts writing some tests, it starts browsing some web. And under the hood, what's going on is there's a language model looking at the task that's input, deciding what to do, outputting some representation of what to do next. Then there's an environment that's executing that action, and then it's going back to the language model and it's asking it what to do next. And there's this loop, and it's looping and deciding what to do and taking these steps. And I bet most of you have interacted with this. So the data analysis functionality, the code interpreter in ChatGPT, I would argue is an agent. It's loading a CSV, it's writing some code, it's executing that, and then it's looking at the result and responding. And so there's this idea of language models being part of a system. And when we talk about things like Her and things in the movie and things that are embodied in the world and interacting, these are all what I would argue are agents, where there's a language model powering the reasoning. And these things exist, and we're using them today. So what's the future of these, and how are they going to get better? Because even though they exist, they're still not amazingly widespread. And I would argue the main thing that's needed to get them to the next level is actually memory. And so I'd argue there's two forms of memory that are needed for these to become more practical. One is kind of system-level procedural memory. So if you give an agent access to your system, it's going to have to learn how to use it, what the correct way to use it is. Just as if you gave a human access to a system, it's going to try some things out, it's going to see some errors, it's going to then learn what to do the next time. And so how do you store those learnings? How do you store those learnings so that the agent, the next time it sees a similar problem, can remember those? In a similar vein, there's another type of memory that I think is equally important, which is more around personalization. So what do you as an end user like? What I like and what Peter may like may be very different. And so if an agent's interacting with one of us versus the other, it should know those differences. And it should make our experiences tailored towards those preferences. And I think it's a very open question right now how that memory is represented. Do you update the language model? Do you update the weights? There's, that's computationally intensive, but compute's getting cheaper and cheaper and driving costs down, so maybe that's feasible. The main way for interacting with language models right now is through prompting. And so that's a string. Do you update the string? Another main method is to provide few-shot examples, where you provide maybe 3 to 5 examples of what has happened. That seems great for procedural memory, so maybe that's a good path forward there. And I definitely don't have all the answers, and I don't think anyone does. But that's what I'm spending a lot of time thinking about. I think it's really exciting, and I think that's what's going to take to get these agents to be the things that we imagine in the future. Actually practical, actually useful, and extremely transformative. Thank you.
Fantastic.